Roman Reigns just admitted he hired the Mystery Man, and what he did to CM Punk is criminal. The Tribal Chief just confessed to orchestrating the most calculated and vicious attack in WWE history, and what Roman Reigns revealed about hiring a Mystery Man to destroy CM Punk at Survivor Series proves that the head of the table will cross any line, break any rule, and sacrifice any moral boundary to maintain his stranglehold on power. Roman didn't just admit to the conspiracy on Monday Night Raw. He bragged about it, detailed every step of his master plan, and made it clear that anyone who threatens Bloodline supremacy will face the same fate as Punk, who's now in a hospital bed fighting to save his career after the brutal assault. Before I break down every disturbing detail of Roman's confession and expose the identity of the hired attacker who nearly ended Punk's life, answer me this: is Roman Reigns the greatest heel in wrestling history for his willingness to do absolutely anything to win, or has he crossed into territory that's too dark and too real for wrestling entertainment? Drop your answer in the comments, because what Roman admitted to doing is either brilliant storytelling or genuinely unforgivable, and the wrestling world cannot agree which. The attack on CM Punk at Survivor Series was one of the most vicious and shocking moments WWE has aired in the modern era. During what should have been Punk's triumphant victory in a high-profile match, a mystery man emerged from the crowd wearing street clothes and a hoodie that obscured his identity. This wasn't a wrestler making a surprise appearance or a planned storyline interruption. This looked like a legitimate assault, with the attacker wielding a steel pipe and targeting CM Punk's leg with repeated brutal strikes that echoed through the arena. The sound of metal hitting flesh and bone made fans in attendance genuinely uncomfortable, with many covering their ears or looking away as Punk's screams of agony filled the building. Security seemed confused and slow to respond, almost as if they'd been instructed to let the attack continue for maximum damage before intervening. The brutality didn't stop with the pipe shots. The mystery attacker then dragged Punk's injured leg and placed it between the steel steps and the ring post, setting up for the kind of injury spot that ends careers. Before officials could stop him, the attacker kicked the steel steps with tremendous force, crushing Punk's leg between unforgiving metal surfaces in a moment that made everyone watching wince in sympathetic pain. The visual of Punk clutching his leg and writhing in obvious agony while medical personnel rushed to his aid was disturbing enough that WWE cut to a commercial break earlier than planned, unable to continue broadcasting the graphic scene of potential career-ending injury playing out in their ring. CM Punk was stretchered out of Survivor Series with his leg immobilized, his face showing genuine anguish that couldn't be faked or sold as typical wrestling dramatics. Initial reports suggested severe damage to Punk's knee and possibly his ankle, with legitimate concerns about torn ligaments, fractured bones, and the kind of injuries that require extensive surgery and months of rehabilitation. The attack effectively removed Punk from WWE programming indefinitely, taking out one of the company's top stars and biggest draws at a crucial moment in the build toward WrestleMania season. The timing wasn't coincidental, and everyone suspected that removing Punk served someone's interests, but proving who orchestrated the attack seemed impossible given the attacker's disguise and quick escape through the crowd. Quick question for you: what's the most realistic-looking attack you've ever seen in wrestling? Comment below, because this Survivor Series assault might top everyone's list for sheer believability and brutality. The speculation about who hired the mystery attacker immediately centered on Roman Reigns, given that CM Punk had been positioned as one of the few legitimate threats to Roman's championship reign and bloodline dominance. Punk had been vocal about wanting to dethrone the Tribal Chief, had been building momentum with wins over top competitors, and represented everything Roman opposed: an outsider who challenged authority, refused to acknowledge hierarchy, and believed his talent entitled him to opportunities regardless of bloodline politics. Removing Punk cleared Roman's path to continued dominance while sending a message to anyone else considering challenging the head of the table. But without proof, the accusations against Roman remained speculation and conspiracy theory rather than confirmed facts. Roman Reigns kept suspiciously quiet in the immediate aftermath of Punk's attack, neither condemning the violence nor expressing any concern for Punk's condition. That silence felt calculated and spoke volumes about Roman's potential involvement, but silence isn't evidence, and Roman's legal team would easily argue that he had no obligation to comment on an attack he supposedly had nothing to do with. The Tribal Chief continued his regular programming, defending his championship against other challengers, acting as if Punk's removal from competition was just an unfortunate incident that happened to benefit Roman's continued reign. The sociopathic coldness of Roman's non-reaction actually added to suspicions rather than reducing them, making fans more convinced than ever that he'd orchestrated the entire assault. Paul Heyman's behavior in the weeks following Survivor Series also raised red flags for people investigating the attack. The Wiseman seemed nervous and evasive when asked about the mystery attacker, deflecting questions and changing subjects with uncharacteristic lack of smoothness. Heyman's usually silver tongue seemed to fail him when discussing Punk's injury, suggesting he knew more than he was willing to say and felt uncomfortable with the role he might have played in facilitating the attack. Several wrestlers reported that Heyman had been making unusual phone calls in private locations before Survivor Series, behavior that seemed suspicious in hindsight once Punk was attacked. Do you think Paul Heyman is complicit in Roman's conspiracy, or is he just caught in the middle trying to protect his client? Share your take in the comments section. The confession came on Monday Night Raw during a promo segment where Roman Reigns was supposed to be celebrating his continued championship reign and bloodline dominance. Roman started conventionally, talking about his accomplishments and his superiority over everyone who'd ever challenged him. But then his tone shifted, becoming darker and more menacing as he began discussing the concept of leadership and what it takes to maintain power in WWE's cutthroat environment. Leadership isn't about being nice. Leadership isn't about playing fair or giving everyone equal opportunities. Leadership is about identifying threats and eliminating them before they can challenge your position. CM Punk was a threat. CM Punk was positioning himself as the one person who could potentially take what belongs to me. So I did what any intelligent leader would do. I eliminated that threat. The crowd's reaction shifted from normal heat for Roman's villainous promo to genuine shock as people realized what he was implying. Roman wasn't speaking in hypotheticals or making vague threats about future actions. He was talking about something that had already happened, and the pieces were falling into place in real time for everyone listening. Roman continued, his voice becoming colder and more matter-of-fact. That attack at Survivor Series? That mystery man who destroyed Punk's leg and possibly ended his career? That was me. Not physically, obviously. I don't need to get my hands dirty when I can afford to hire people to handle problems for me. I hired that man. I paid him well. I gave him specific instructions about where to target, how much damage to inflict, and when to disappear. Every second of that attack was planned, calculated, and executed exactly as I designed it. The confession was stunning in its brazenness and complete lack of remorse. Roman wasn't confessing out of guilt or because he'd been caught. He was confessing because he wanted everyone to know what he was capable of, wanted to instill fear in anyone else who might consider challenging him. The psychological warfare was masterful from a villain perspective but deeply disturbing from a moral perspective. Roman was essentially admitting to conspiracy to commit assault and potentially attempted murder if the attack had gone slightly differently, yet he stood there smiling like he'd just described ordering dinner rather than ordering an attack that hospitalized a fellow performer. The identity of the hired attacker was Roman's next revelation, and this information sent shockwaves through the wrestling community. You want to know who I hired? You want to know who was willing to take my money and destroy CM Punk without asking questions? It was Karrion Kross. A man who Punk disrespected, who Punk dismissed as not being on his level, who Punk never saw as a legitimate threat. Karrion was more than happy to take my money and take out his frustration on Punk at the same time. It was the perfect arrangement. Karrion got paid and got revenge, I got rid of a problem, and Punk learned that his arrogance and his inability to show respect have consequences. Can you believe Karrion Kross was the mystery attacker? Did you suspect him at all, or was this a complete surprise? Let me know in the comments. The involvement of Karrion Kross added personal dimensions to the attack because Kross and Punk did have documented history and tension. Punk had made dismissive comments about Kross's abilities in interviews, suggesting Kross was more presentation than substance and wasn't in Punk's league as a performer. Those comments clearly bothered Kross, who'd been vocal about proving himself against top-tier talent. Roman had apparently identified the tension and exploited it perfectly, finding someone with both the physical capability to execute the attack and the personal motivation to ensure it was carried out with maximum prejudice. The strategic intelligence of Roman's hiring decision showed how deeply he understands human psychology and how to manipulate people's emotions and grievances to serve his purposes. Karrion Kross's own statement released via social media shortly after Roman's confession confirmed his involvement and provided additional disturbing details. Kross posted, "Yes, I attacked CM Punk at Survivor Series. Yes, Roman Reigns paid me to do it. And yes, I enjoyed every second of destroying that arrogant piece of trash who thought he was better than everyone else. Punk disrespected me, dismissed me, and now he's paying the price for his arrogance. The money Roman paid was nice, but honestly, I would have done it for free just to wipe that smug look off Punk's face. No regrets, no apologies, and if I had the chance to do it again, I'd hit him even harder." The complete absence of remorse or concern about consequences was chilling and raised questions about whether WWE had created an environment where this level of planned violence was acceptable or even encouraged. The legal implications of Roman's confession and Kross's admission are potentially catastrophic for everyone involved. Both men essentially confessed to conspiracy to commit assault, which is a serious crime regardless of whether it happened during a wrestling event. CM Punk could press criminal charges against both Roman and Karrion, and he'd have their public confessions as evidence. WWE could face massive civil liability for providing the venue and platform where the planned attack occurred, especially if it can be proven that management knew or should have known about the conspiracy. The company's attorneys are probably in crisis mode trying to determine how much legal exposure this creates and whether they can claim it was all work storyline rather than actual criminal conspiracy. Have you ever seen wrestlers confess to crimes on television before? Share examples in the comments because this situation feels unprecedented in its legal recklessness. WWE's official response to Roman's confession was predictably cautious and legally protective. The company released a statement saying, "The events described on tonight's programming are part of ongoing storylines. WWE takes the safety of all performers seriously and investigates any incidents that occur during our events. We will be reviewing the situation involving Roman Reigns, Karrion Kross, and CM Punk to determine appropriate next steps. The carefully worded statement neither confirmed nor denied that the attack was real versus worked, giving WWE plausible deniability while not actually addressing whether there would be consequences for Roman or Kross for orchestrating assault on a fellow performer. CM Punk's response came via a video message from his hospital bed, and the raw emotion in his words made it clear that regardless of whether the attack was technically part of a storyline, the injuries were real and the betrayal ran deep. Punk looked exhausted and in obvious pain as he spoke. Roman Reigns admitted he hired someone to end my career. Karrion Kross admitted he was happy to be that hired gun. Both of them confessed to conspiracy and assault on live television, and somehow they're both walking around free while I'm lying here with a destroyed leg wondering if I'll ever wrestle again. This isn't storyline. This isn't entertainment. This is real-life consequences of WWE creating an environment where the most powerful people can literally hire hitmen to take out their competition, and there are zero consequences as long as you're valuable enough to the company. I'm going to recover from these injuries, and when I do, both Roman and Karrion are going to pay for what they did in ways that will make their confessions look like the stupidest mistakes of their careers. The moral implications of WWE presenting a storyline where a protagonist hires someone to commit assault raise questions about what messages the company is sending to viewers. Portraying Roman as someone who can casually hire attackers and face no immediate consequences normalizes conspiracy to commit violence and suggests that powerful people operate above the law. Some critics argue this is dangerous content that glorifies criminal behavior, while others defend it as obviously fictional entertainment where consequences will eventually come during the storyline's resolution. The debate reflects larger questions about wrestling's responsibility to portray clear moral lines versus the artistic freedom to tell dark, complex stories. The Bloodline's unity around Roman's confession showed their complete moral corruption and willingness to support any action that maintains their power. Solo Sikoa, the Usos, and other Bloodline members publicly supported Roman's decision to hire Kross, framing it as strategic brilliance rather than criminal conspiracy. Their defense of Roman's actions positioned the entire faction as villains operating beyond normal ethical boundaries, which creates compelling heel heat but also raises questions about whether any line exists that they wouldn't cross. The normalization of hiring hitmen within the Bloodline's value system suggests a descent into sociopathy that makes them terrifying antagonists but also potentially too dark for traditional wrestling storytelling where some redemptive qualities usually exist even in villains. The locker room's reaction has reportedly been split between people who view this as compelling storytelling and those who are genuinely uncomfortable with how real the violence looked and how casually Roman and Kross have treated potentially career-ending injuries. Some wrestlers have privately expressed concern that WWE is creating a culture where extreme violence is expected and celebrated, pushing performers to take more risks and absorb more damage to meet audience expectations. Others argue that everyone involved knew this was coming and Punk agreed to the angle, making all the concern unnecessary pearl-clutching by people who don't understand how wrestling works. The division reflects broader tensions within wrestling about where boundaries should be between athletic performance and realistic violence. Social media has predictably exploded with hashtags like #JusticeForPunk and #RomanMustPay trending alongside counter hashtags from Bloodline supporters celebrating Roman's ruthless efficiency. The engagement numbers are massive, with millions of people discussing the storyline and debating whether Roman went too far or whether this is exactly the kind of villainous behavior that makes him wrestling's best heel. WWE has achieved their goal of creating conversation and mainstream attention, though whether the attention is worth the potential backlash and legal complications remains to be seen. So here's my final question, and this is the critical one: is Roman Reigns admitting he hired Karrion Kross to attack CM Punk the boldest and most brilliant heel move in wrestling history that will define both characters for years? Or has WWE crossed ethical lines by portraying planned assault as acceptable behavior that powerful people can get away with? And when CM Punk returns for his inevitable revenge, should he be just as ruthless and violent as Roman, or should he take the high road to maintain moral superiority? Get in those comments right now and let your voice be heard, because this storyline is either a masterpiece of villain character work or a dangerous glorification of criminal conspiracy, and there's no middle ground between those two positions.